Dial, and I currently serve as president of Triangle Interfaith Alliance. And it is a pleasure for me, a great pleasure, on behalf of the Board of Directors of the Triangle Interfaith Alliance, to welcome you to our annual dinner. And thank you so much for taking your time out of your busy lives to join us tonight. TIA is dedicated to promoting harmony, trust, and understanding among all faiths, races, groups, and people. And we are open to all people of good faith who support our goals. And these goals, this is the abbreviated form now, are respect, reason, reflection, deliberation, trust, unity, fairness, and understanding. It is our aim to have a society that emphasizes both the strengths of diversity and the need for unity. Now, where diverse peoples work together, building community for common good. This is what we strive to do. And many of you have been with us on this journey for years. And for that, we thank you. And many of you are just starting your journey with us. And so we say the trip will be worth your while. It will be worth it. And I must pause and let you know that this dinner, this evening, is dedicated to two of the early founders of our organization. Bill Bingham, not listed on the program, but I'm including you, Bill, Alan Neely, and Martin Jacobs. They were there from the very beginning, so we give thanks to them and their vision.
We are gathered today under the shadow of a deep tragedy against Muslim youth in Chapel Hill. While there is an investigation whether it was a parking dispute or, as one of our board members mentioned, parking while Muslim dispute, it is fair to say that Muslims in the USA are currently facing widespread discrimination and hate attacks. FBI's 2013 crime report states that anti-Muslim hate crime are still 5 times more common today than before 9/11. This is despite the fact that some 56% of hate crimes are never reported to police, and more than half of those that are reported are mischaracterized as non-hate crime, so the actual number of hate crimes would be even much higher. According to a 2014 Pew survey, Muslims have the lowest favorability view of all the religious groups in the USA. In an earlier survey by Cornell University, 44% Americans favor curtailing some liberties for Muslim Americans. Muslims are also victims of a demonizing and dehumanizing by the US TV and Hollywood media. American academic Jack Sheehan has documented some of the most racist, anti-Arab and anti-Muslim slander in the US silent cinema to current blockbusters in his book Real Bad Arabs, that has also been made into a documentary film. Discrimination against Muslims is so deeply entrenched, it has become an official policy in many parts of the country. Highly public campaigns have been conducted against mosque constructions around the nation. There is a drumbeat of fear-mongering by politicians and media figures regarding alleged plots by Muslim Americans to override the Constitution and impose Islamic law on the country. Many states, including North Carolina, have passed anti-Sharia laws. North Carolina legislator Michelle Presnell has gone on record equating Islamic prayer to terrorism. That was in 2013. Friends, it is fair to say that Muslims of all religious communities are victims of one of the worst media and public policy attacks, and these can have serious repercussions on Muslims. At the same time, fighting against Islamophobia is as American Pie. Anti-black racism, anti-Semitism, homophobia have been challenged by education and grassroots movements. The new civil rights movement will have to challenge oppression based on color, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, and all religious backgrounds. With that background, it is my great honor to introduce to you our keynote speaker, Imam Khalid Griggs, who's leading a fight against Islamophobia and racism. I first met him in a conference titled Bridging the Divide Between Immigrant and African American Muslims. It is my belief that immigrant Muslims have a lot to learn about racism and Jim Crow through the experience of African Americans. And Muslims are blessed to have strong civil rights leaders within the African American Muslim community. Imam Khalid Griggs has started his work in anti-racism and anti-war movement during his college days at Howard University. Imam Khalid Griggs is a lifelong human rights and prison reform advocate, founding member of Muslims for Social Justice, and chairman of the board of Islamic Circle of North America Council for Social Justice. Imam Griggs is a freelance journalist and author of a book, Come Let Us Change the World, A Brief History of Islamic Party in North America. Imam Khalid Griggs is the recipient of numerous awards and citations recognizing his commitment to social justice and social and religious pluralism. With this, I present to you Imam Khalid Griggs.
I'd like to begin by greeting you in a universal greeting of peace. This greeting is extended by 1.6 billion people around the world. It's actually more than just a greeting. It's a supplication for God's peace to be upon the recipient of this greeting. And so I'm sure you already know, but if you don't get anything else of what I say this evening, at least you'll know how Muslims greet one another and how that greeting is returned. And I think it's very important in the times, in the context of today, in the context of what's going on in this country, that I began with this greeting of peace. I say Assalamu alaikum. The response is Wa alaikum salam. Assalamu alaikum is the supplication of peace be unto you, and the return is Wa alaikum salam, and peace be unto you also. So, Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much. I want to first thank the Triangle Interfaith Alliance for sponsoring this occasion, for bringing us together. Bringing us together at a time when we are so challenged to be pulled apart. You know, many of you in this room, like myself, attended a vigil last night in Chapel Hill at Carolina. And many of us attended the janazah of funeral prayers for 3 young Muslims who were shot down, not just shot in some kind of drive-by shooting. And I'm not trying to be dramatic, but I think that what has happened and what happened on Tuesday and the aftermath of this is something that we have to stick a pin in. We can't just act like this event did not happen. As a matter of fact, the ideas that I wanted to speak about today have been very modified as a result of these events. It makes it seem that what I will talk to you all about just a little bit, the things that I'm going through on my job, the kind of attention that I have gotten as a result of being Muslim, the mischaracterization of the over 40 years of my life as a Muslim, trying to serve the entire community wherever I've lived, not just the Muslim community. This mischaracterization pales when we think about what happened this past Tuesday in Chapel Hill. And I'll say also at the outset that it's very ironic and confusing for some of us for this to take place not in some other part of North Carolina where I and some of you may typically think that acts of bigotry and extremism may take place. But what has historically been the most liberal city in North Carolina, in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And so we have to pause. We have to reflect. We have to think about Dia Baraka, a 25-year-old young man. Every life is promising. Every life has value. The value to his life was not because he was about to go to Turkey and to help Syrian refugees, because they were suffering from so many, they have nothing for the most part. It didn't matter that he was in the school of dentistry. That didn't matter. That didn't give value to his life. What gave value to his life was that he was simply a human being. And as a human being, regardless of what his religious profession was, no one has the right to target and to kill someone. And until this overwhelming evidence comes forward, no one can convince me at this moment that it was anything other than a targeted hate crime. So it was not the value that he had as a very educated person, as a person who was very kind and friendly and caring and concerned about the homeless and concerned about the hungry. That didn't give value. The value was just simply that he was a human being. And we can recognize those other qualities that he had. But if he had none of those things, if he didn't finish middle school, if he had gone to prison in his life, none of that mattered. It would give no more value to him as a human being, nor would any more value be affixed to his wife. They had just gotten married, I understand, in December of 2014. And her intending to go to dentistry school, that was not a factor that would give value to her life. Forget about that. It was simply the fact, nor was it because it was his wife. It was simply because she was a human being. She was a part of this one family, this human family that no matter what branch or tribe that we come from in this family, we all have equal value, not only just in the eyes of our Creator, but we should have equal value in the eyes of all of us. And then her sister, Razan, 19 years old. And I'll say about her, her value didn't come from who her sister was. It didn't come from who her brother-in-law was. It came from the fact that she was a human being. And as a result of being a human being, she deserved respect. Her life, her property, all of this demands respect for just one reason, and that is because she also was a human being. So I want us to just take a moment of silence and pray in whatever framework and whatever, silently to yourself, whatever comes to your heart. And let's lift up these human beings and pray that the mercy of God be upon them. Amen. Brothers and sisters, I want to just talk. I'm not going to take a lot of your time, but I've been asked to talk on the topic of faith and social justice. And it's a very, very important topic. Why? Not because I'm talking about it or been asked to address it, but faith is something that moves us to do things that we didn't think we were capable of doing. Faith is that element in our lives. And I'm not talking about faith in the narrow constraints of a religion. I'm not talking about faith in that context. I'm saying faith, what you believe in. How do you define your existence? What set of principles are you defined by? That kind of faith. For those of us who subscribe to, as I subscribe to Islam, to the Christians, to the Buddhists, to the Hindus, to the Jews, to those who say I'm a secular humanist, whatever your faith may be, everyone has a faith. And so just for a few moments, I want to talk about the importance of that faith and this thing called social justice. Social justice as a term is not something, in my little bit of research, has shown me that it's a term that the human family has used since Adam. If we believe in Adam being the first man, there's nothing that I see in the Quran, there's nothing I see in other scriptures that say that the term, the specific term of social justice is nothing other than a relatively new coinage of an expression. As a matter of fact, the earliest time that I can see that the term put together, justice and social put together, to have a very deliberate meaning was by a Jesuit scholar who in about 1840 came up with this term to describe how one should live outside of themselves. Don't just be concerned about your personal safety, how much money I can bring to my own family, how much my extended family can enrich themselves or reap the benefits of the society, but to live outside of your personal interests. That this concept of social justice, combining those set of ideas and principles that define what you believe, and now combine this with this idea that my faith compels me to look outside of my self-interest and to even go further, to look outside my self-interest to the point that it may be disadvantageous for me to take a certain position, because this position may be the prevailing idea. And we'll talk about some of these ideas as they have manifest themselves not somewhere on the other side of the Atlantic or the Pacific, but right here in the United States. And so when we take this faith and now we combine it with this term, this social justice, this distribution, and there's so many ways we can define it. I'm just going to throw out parts of ways we can look at this so we can at least walk away with an understanding. What is this crazy guy talking about when he's talking about social justice? What I'm referring to is a kind of distribution of wealth, of opportunities, of privilege in the society. How does that get dispensed? How is the money? How is the wealth? How does that get dispensed and distributed in the society? How do opportunities get distributed? Are the opportunities based on the religion of the people or the individual? Are opportunities dispensed based on skin color or ethnicity? Are opportunities based on anything other than just the right of every human being in the society to benefit, to reap the rewards from what is available in the society? Simply put, if we're talking about social justice, and for the purpose of this discussion, how our consciousness and our actions should be informed by our faith in the society, that society would have a certain kind of look. Now, in the interest of time, Brother Mansour told me, now if you have a watch, pay attention to your watch, because I know you run your mouth all night. So I'm going to behave tonight. I'm going to listen to Brother Mansour, and I'm going to keep looking at my watch and make sure that I don't go beyond my time. But I want to touch on just a few things and bring this kind of quickly to an end, tie a few points together, and then come to a conclusion. I want to talk about, just for a moment, a prophet of God that 1.6 billion people around the world who call themselves Muslim believe that this prophet was the Khatam Nabi'een. He was the seal. He was the last of the prophets. And I'm talking about Muhammad, the son of Abdullah. Not the Muhammad that you read about, that you see cartoons depicting and giving caricatures and all these kinds of things. Not that Muhammad, but the Muhammad, the real, the actual person. That this prophet of God said that there were over 120,000 different prophets. And he even said that to every people. Now he was born in the 6th century. And so at that time he's saying to every people at some point in their history there had come a prophet. So we wouldn't be wandering around not knowing what we're supposed to be doing on earth. He said there were over 120,000. I'm the last one, and every people on earth have had this prophet. Now the Quran only mentions 26. So I've never been good in math, but when I subtract 26 from 120,000, that means that there are a whole lot of them that have not been called by name in this book of the Muslims, the Quran. And so it means then that when people come forward and say that this person or that person was a prophet, unless there's something in the Quran or in the saying of Muhammad to say that's not true, it's not my place or any other Muslim's place to say, no, that ain't right. Well, how do we know? All we know is what's in that Quran and what the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said. Now, let me just share something that he said, and that he said that God, that Allah said in the context of social justice. What does this mean? How is this reflected? The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, has said that God, that Allah, in what's called a hadith Qudsi, a sacred hadith. This is something where a revelation came to Muhammad. It's not in the Quran. So Muhammad, peace be upon him, paraphrases. He puts it in his own words. He doesn't change the meaning, but he expresses in his own words what God had said to him. And in one of these narrations, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said that Allah has said, that my Lord has said, that I have forbidden oppression on myself. Meaning that the Lord of the universes is saying that I have made it forbidden to myself to be unjust and oppressive to anything, anyone in my creation, anything in my creation. So therefore you, don't be an oppressor. Don't you do it. You don't have the right to do it. Your Lord is telling you that it is something that is so horrible that the one who has the power to do whatever he wants has forbidden this to himself. So now, don't you do it. Don't be an oppressor. The wife of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, Salama, said in a tradition about the Prophet Muhammad that when he was at my house every morning before he left out the door, he raised his eyes to the heavens and he made this supplication. Oh Allah, oh God, don't let me be oppressed, neither let me be one of the oppressors. That this was a mantra, that before he would step away from his house, he would look to the heavens, because this issue of justice and being a just person and trying to establish a just society will always be so important that he said that, oh Allah, don't let me oppress anybody, or don't let me be an oppressor, and don't let anyone oppress me. To move a little further, after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he had successors who were the head, not as prophets, but as the head of the Islamic government. One of them, his first successor, was a man by the name of Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr, when he was after taking the oath of office, if I can put it like this, after he assumed the responsibility as head of the Islamic State, he said that under my rule, I want you to get something clear right now. Understand this from the beginning.
that the weak are going to be made strong, and the strong are going to be made weak until justice is established. Now, you may not like it if you're one of those strong folks. You're going to love it if you're one of the weak. But Abu Bakr didn't care about that. He's saying that my responsibility over the society is to restore the rights of the weak and the oppressed, if it means appropriating that from the strong and the powerful, and then vice versa. Let me give you another quick story. I have to keep moving because Brother Mansour is going to be on me here in a few minutes. Another story from the second successor as the head of the government after the leadership, the political leadership of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. The second person was a man by the name of Omar ibn al-Khattab. And Omar was a very unique person. You know, this was before CNN, this was before the internet, Facebook, Twitter, all these other things, CNN. So people didn't know, even sometimes in the city where he lived, what he even looked like. If they were never in the area, they couldn't identify him on the street. But it was one of his patterns. Every night, he would get up and walk through the street incognito. And to just walk around to listen and to see what are the actual needs of my people. What do they need? I'm hearing one thing, but I want to see and hear for myself. And this is what he would do. He didn't have to do this, but this was something that he took upon himself to do in order to try to have a just society and environment that he was responsible for. And this Omar was such a personality that, and I'll just give one example in the interest of time. When the Christian leader of Jerusalem has said that I'm going to turn over the keys of the city, not literally like it's one key to go to a gate, but give you the symbolic key to the city, the response was that I'm turning it over to the Muslims, but there's only one person I'm going to turn this key over to, and that's your Khalid. This is your leader, Omar ibn al-Khattab. So Omar said, okay, I'll do that. So Omar took a servant with him. And Omar said, and this is the kind of contrast that we as Muslims and so many others have in the world and our political leadership today. The kind that, you know, whether you're being carried around on a portable throne or not, they may as well be carried around on portable thrones in the way that they act and the way that they don't dispense justice, particularly in the Muslim world. And so Omar took one of his servants. He said, well, come, I got to go to Jerusalem. I got some business to take care of. Come and ride with me. They only had one horse. And so Omar and his servant said, okay, we'll take turns. You ride a certain distance, I ride a certain distance, and we'll do this all the way to Jerusalem. When they were approaching Jerusalem, it was the servant's time to get on the horse, and it was Omar's time to be on the horse. The servant was riding. He said to Omar, you have to let me get down. He said, no, it's your turn. This is how we're going in. We agreed on this. It's no slave, servant, master relationship here. We have an agreement. So when they got in the city, the people looked at Omar and they looked at the servant and they thought the servant was the head of the Muslims. Not just because he was on the horse, but he was better dressed than Omar. Omar had patches in his clothes. He looked like I looked most of the time. He was toe up from the floor. And so the people in Jerusalem looked at Omar and they thought that this has to be the servant and this other man has to be the leader. And so I want to bring it, to try to bring this, the point and the context home. And I want to say that we believe as Muslims that prophethood has ended. It ended, we believe, over 1,400 years ago with Muhammad, the son of Abdullah, peace be upon him. But what you and I and all of us must believe in is that God will inspire each and every one of us. Nobody's sitting around. I mean, if I were to stand here, and I hate to even joke and say something like this, with the Muslims in the room and I stood here and started talking about I received some kind of revelation from God last night, I wouldn't be able to get out of here. I mean, they would put their hands on me and sit me down and wreck me before I could get off the stage. I wouldn't be able to do it. But the inspiration, the kind of prophetic visioning, looking into the society and identifying those things that need to change, that have to change at every time, at every point in our human history, we, people of faith, people who have any kind of faith, any principle, what set of beliefs do you govern your life by? We have to have this capacity to unabashedly look into the society and say that this is wrong. That I don't care how many people are doing it, this is wrong. It's a violation against our humanity. We will never develop a just and compassionate society with these kind of things going on. Let me just run through some real quick stuff. And just talking about here in North America. What happened when the Europeans came here? And as the myth of Columbus discovering something, this dude thinking he's in India bumps into the Caribbean islands. And he's discovered a new world that just so happened to be full of people. But what happened in this encounter? If we're honest about it, what happened in this encounter? What happened was, as this so-called exploration came up into this landmass that we now call America, there was this genocide against these indigenous people. And there were some voices, some from the indigenous, like Chief Joseph of the Nez Perez, that were driven almost into the Pacific Ocean as this westward expansion started all the way up into Washington State. That there were prophetic voices not receiving revelation, but there were voices from the indigenous people, there were voices from the Christian community who were saying that what we're doing is wrong. I don't care who is endorsing it. The president may endorse it. It doesn't matter who's endorsing it. It's wrong. They spoke out against it. When the transatlantic slave trade went on for hundreds of years, there were voices who were saying, regardless of what the U.S. Supreme Court says, regardless of what the states and these local legislatures say, this is wrong. It's an affront against humanity. People were born out of the struggle who came as prophetic voices as saying that you're dooming a nation by mistreating a segment of humanity the way that you're doing. And there's so many names that we can offer up. Look at what happened. Let me jump forward. Look at what happened. In the more modern era, in the civil rights movement. Right? If you haven't seen the movie Selma, if you don't know anything about what happened in Selma, Alabama in 1965, and before that and after that, my father was a union organizer. And when I was very young, I used to go around to different places where my father was on union campaigns and heading up union campaigns. And in 1965, my father was over a 5-year strike as an organizer in Selma, Alabama. During that Christmas season, while I was out of school, he brought me down to Selma. And he was talking to me when he brought me down there. He said, yeah, you know, I missed that Edmund Pettus Bridge thing. I missed that because I came home that weekend. Otherwise, I would have been there and I would have probably gotten my head cracked as well. And so I grew up in a household being these stories rehearsed. But there weren't just stories about what was happening to the people. It was about the resistance. Those prophetic prophetic voices that were speaking out, this is wrong. I don't care whether it's the law of the land and this is how you do it in the South. This is wrong. It's an abomination against humanity to do what you're doing. There's so many other struggles that have gone on in this country. The Native American struggles in more modern times through the American Indian movement. We can go on and on and on, but I want to arrive at this point. And I want to leave you with this discussion. That as Frantz Fanon has said, this brilliant psychiatrist who was an observer of the French Revolution that culminated in 1952, that paraphrasing an expression that I have gleaned off the pages of so many of his works, that every generation, every group of young people that comes on the face of this earth will have to identify their mission. What am I on earth? You young people right here. You're going to have to ask yourself, why am I put on earth at this particular juncture in history? Why wasn't I back there at another period of time in the United States? No, you and I are here. All of us, we're here right now. And we have to identify what is this mission, or as Fanon say, if you don't, you're going to betray it. You're going to be a use, and this is my editorial comment, we will be useless footnotes to history if we don't know what is the issue, what is it right now. Not exclusively, but what is it? I want to submit to you today, and I'll say this in closing, that I sincerely believe. I was a union organizer for a time myself. I've been involved in a lot of struggles in all of my years on earth before Islam as a Muslim. And my humble, honest opinion is that you and I need to pay close attention to this phenomenon that is sweeping the world, and specifically in the United States, that is characterized as Islamophobia. A British think tank called the Runnymede Trust in 1997 looked at this phenomena in the UK and said that something is happening here. I mean, we got all of these Muslims coming into the UK, and the more that come, the more we can see a pattern of discrimination, the more we can see the Muslims being mischaracterized, the more people are talking about this religion is something evil and wicked. This was back in 1997 when this term became very current and used in Western countries and now here in the United States. But let me tell you something about the consequences of whipping people into hysteria against any group of people. I don't care who it is. Any group of people. As an African American, and Sister Tahira, someone I've known for over 40 years, she's a treasure that you all have in your midst right here. Brother Mansour, you got to pull her into Muslims for Social Justice. She is a sister that has been struggling for so long on so many fronts that we have to recognize we have experienced the brunt of what happens when we sit around and say that we're people of faith and be content and think that God is going to take care of it. Dr. Martin Luther King said that the belief that God will do everything and you don't have to do anything, that's not faith, that's superstition. Don't call it faith if you think that God is just going to send angels to come on the earth to correct the wrongs from amongst human beings, between human beings. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. He's the most quotable person I know. I love so many folks and their quotes, but I love Dr. King and his quotes. Another one that he has is this whole idea about not putting God, trying to cast him in the light of being a cosmic bellhop. That all you do is just ring your bell, oh God, give me this, do this for me. And God is supposed to just hop around wherever you imagine him to be to just take care of your needs throughout this cosmic world. So I want to just point out that this phenomenon of Islamophobia, whether or not this self-avowed atheist, Hicks, who killed these 3 young people or not, whether that was his motivation, whether that caused him to arrive at this point or not, whether or not that was the motivation, how Islamophobia and racism and anti-immigration and all of these things and anti-rights for anybody who doesn't look like me, that Islamophobia, in my opinion, are all of those things. It's racism, it's bigotry, it's all of that on steroids. Because in the Muslim community, we have a community of immigrants. 1/3 of us as Muslims in this country are African Americans. Then you have the other 2/3 divided up by the largest and widest representation of the global Muslim community. There's no other country in the world that has more citizens and residents in its border, Muslims who represent Muslims from so many different countries like America. But still, 1/3 are African Americans. 2/3 are from all over the earth. And so if you are against immigration, if you want to electrify our borders, if you want to have these killer, crazy people riding around shooting down people as they try to come into this country, not to rob and to steal, but to work because of conditions that our government has helped to create in these countries. And they're trying to get in the countries, and now we say, let's kill these people. Let's electrocute them with fences. Let's put these madmen in jeeps to patrol our border and shoot down anyone that we see. So if you want elements of this kind of bigotry, Islamophobia has it for you. Because this is what makes up the fabric of Muslims in this country. So when Franklin Graham, and I'll close on this note, when Franklin Graham said and did what he did, and it's not the first time. I mean, the Muslim community, we're very familiar, and I hope no one takes offense. You know, if Franklin Graham is your minister, I don't mean any harm. I don't, but I have to say it. Franklin Graham is a very, in my humble opinion, has been very hateful in the way that he has characterized the religion of 7 to 8 million people in this country and 1.6 billion people around the earth. We're talking about over 1 out of every 5 people on earth is a Muslim. That's not a cult. That's not a cult. 1 out of 5, it's a whole lot of people on earth. That's not a cult. This is not something that came out of the 20th or 21st century. It's over 1,400 years old. It's not a cult. And so he's doing not just the Muslim community a disservice. He's doing this nation a disservice at a time when we're trying to come together. We're trying to lift each other up. We're trying to identify a higher existence, and not just subsistence, but existence for everybody. And now here's someone who's tearing us apart. And so, I don't know, but I've been told that, of course, the Christian bells ring from Duke Chapel. But I also have been told that bells for the Jewish community ring from Duke Chapel. So, I don't know, maybe I'm thinking about it too simply, but what's wrong when you got that many Muslims there? You have a significant population of Muslims on that campus. What's wrong with 3 minutes on Fridays as a call to prayer to facilitate the Muslims knowing that now is the time for us to gather to pray? What's wrong with that? What's wrong with my attempting to practice, and it's not my choice, but what's wrong with my practicing Islam in the public eye, being out public, not from what I would want to do. I just like to stay in a room and read. If my wife can tell you, if you left me alone, I would never come out of the room with my books. That's all I would want to do. But I have some other things that I do. So what's wrong with that? Why must I be characterized the way that there is a campaign that has been ongoing against me personally? Why should I have to be characterized as some kind of stealthy jihadist? That I heard this term for the first time recently, a Sharia supremacist. Somebody can tell me what that is. Ain't heard that one before. A Sharia supremacist and all of these kinds of things. So, in closing, in all sincerity, do not, for one moment, sleep on this phenomenon of Islamophobia. On Saturday, November the 3rd, 1979, in Greensboro, North Carolina, 5 members of a communist-based organization, they were calling themselves at the time Workers' Viewpoint. After 5 of their members were murdered, they said, okay, we're the Communist Workers' Party. 5 of these workers were shot down in Morningside homes in Greensboro, November the 3rd, 1979. It was captured on national television. And what was going on at that time, there was a Death to the Klan rally that was being held in Morningside homes that was organized by this group. And about 2 or 3 weeks before that, down in China Grove, North Carolina, outside of Charlotte, this group had gone to a Ku Klux Klan rally and disrupted the rally. They went down in the woods where they were burning crosses and knocked their crosses down, and all this kind of thing. So about 2 weeks later, the Ku Klux Klan and American Nazi Party rolled through this public housing complex. They rolled through once, they came through the second time, they stopped. National television cameras captured them slowly walking to their trunks, opening up their trunks, taking out their rifles, identifying who the leaders of the group, who they were going to kill, and they literally blew their brains out on national television. Nothing, no conviction of any kind by these people. Not anything, not a civil rights violation, not a 1st degree, 2nd degree, 3rd degree, 100 degree, no manslaughter, nothing. They were completely acquitted. It was captured on television. How could this happen? In my opinion, I've said this 4 or 5 times, I'm done. How did this happen? In my humble opinion, it happened because the media was culpable in creating this hatred for these non-God believing people who call themselves communists in the Bible Belt of North Carolina. And these people deserve whatever happened to them, they deserved it. And this was the attitude. And I went over there that very next morning. I went out on the site. I picked up the glasses of one of the guys who had been killed and gave it to his wife that morning, on that Sunday morning. And so I'm telling you what, from the vantage point where I was, I believe this from the bottom of my heart. If you and I think that this too past, as so many people have told me, Muslims have told me this. Look at the history of all the other faith communities where they come into the country, Catholics, Jews. You know, it was rough. People got over it. Now look how everything's happened. Don't sleep on that. As the Communist Party, or Communist Workers' Party, how's that working out in America as far as people getting over their hatred and their feelings about the communists? So don't sleep on this. I want to thank all of you for taking the time to listen to me ramble on. I would be remiss if I would make this one final point, and that is that Islamophobia is at the intersection of this movement of Black Lives Matter. It's at the intersection of this Palestinian struggle. It's at the intersection wherever there is oppression, wherever there is a denial of human rights. This is where all of us must come together and lift each other up. Thank you.